But I'm concerned that the alternative recommendation says that consideration be given. But I'm concerned that the alternative recommendation says that consideration be given.
Sorry, I'll just quickly say I would have preferred the word consideration, because as a process, normally this council, when we're trying to talk about what's going to be in next year's budget, we put everything in together and we decide. We don't normally like to put things in as set in stone as this is, but it's unbelievable.
I'm sure that if the council decided to have an allocation of nothing, that would also work within that motion. I have a motion on notice in relation to the Victor Harbour watercourse floodplain. First recommendation is that council receive and note the motion on notice, Victor Harbour watercourse floodplain mapping study. And so someone like to move that way? Councillor Charles, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to talk to receiving and noting the motion? No. Anybody want to talk to that? Put it to the floor. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Unanimously. Councillor Charles, would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you. I asked a question which was answered, thank you very much, by administration, and the question earlier on the flood watercourse floodplain mapping study put out by Southfront, an engineering company. That cost, including GST, was $82,467. We've had that report with us now for 17 months. I'll just read from here. The City of Victor Harbour commissioned the Victor Harbour watercourse floodplain mapping study. The study was undertaken by Southfront Engineering and Construction Company based in Adelaide at Eastwood.
Sorry, Councillor Charles, I'm not with you. You're proposing
your
motion 2 and motion 3?
Yes, I'm sorry to waste your time. That the council instruct administration to personally advise any and all residents who own property that has been professionally identified as being at a risk in the Southfront report to council of the possible and probable inundation by floodwaters. That's part 1. 2. Do you want me to do them separately or put the two together?
It's up to you, it's your motion.
All right. 3, that council, with the collaboration of emergency services, prepare and provide an emergency plan for residents to follow, and that pumps and sandbags are at the ready in the council depot. In other words, council to hold stock. I've been told that the last 2016 people were, when they rang the council here looking for sandbags, were told that they had to go to Alexandrina to pick them up. Get some. So my commentary is, study was undertaken by Southfront Engineering and Construction Company based in Adelaide and Eastwood and presented to council on 28th of June 2019. Southfront were engaged by the City of Victor Harbour to undertake a floodplain and hazard mapping of the major rivers within Greater Victor Harbour to attain information which will form part of a stormwater management plan. The study include 4 areas: Inman and High Marsh Rivers, 1 and 2, and the catchment in the vicinity of Waterport Road, where the aquatic centre is in the Western Port Elliot area, and the 2 creek channels in the southern Encounter Bay. The flooding mapping study has investigated the existing flood risk within these 4 regions and briefly explored stormwater management opportunities to improve the existing level of flood protection in key and vulnerable areas. Note the catchments in the Inman, High Marsh rivers are exceptionally large, extending more than halfway across the Fleurieu Peninsula. So Inman River, High Marsh River, Port Elliot West and southern Encounter Bay were the targets of their work, in fact our area. The South Front study identifies many roads, reserves, homes, commercial properties and public infrastructure will be inundated, and the degree of severity will depend on the annual exceedance event. Flood inundation maps for storm events including 5%, 2%, 1% and 0.2% and annual exceedance probability and the probable maximum flood event. That all sounds like mumbo jumbo, but it's basically saying a 1% chance of a massive storm is a 1 in 100, and then it works backwards and through that area there. So Council has had this study stashed away for 17 months during this time. I read the commentary from administration that this was presented to a council informal gathering on the 12th of August 2019. I don't know whether it was endorsed or not, but that's yet another story. Certainly council can't afford to physically, and there were recommendations made by South Front. Many of them are physical things to mitigate the risk by construction of levees, stormwater channels and so on, and different things had to be done on the seafront. But of course that all depends on whether it's a high or a low tide as to whether it be effective or not. But there must be a point when that work is budgeted and we haven't done that. And I don't see that much of this physical work can ever be budgeted in the short term. In the meantime, the study recommends a list of non-structural measures. 2 of the 10 recommendations are running a flood awareness consultation program with the affected community to aid residents and businesses in preparing flood action plans, identify opportunities to minimise existing flood risk of known vulnerable properties and more generally to inform the community of the existing flood risk. And I believe it's prudent that council share this information with the community to alert them of potential outcomes of a flood event. Council have a duty of care to ensure the residents are kept informed, prepared and safe in the event of a flood. In fact, in the event of any natural disaster, as we've been speaking about with the COVID earlier in the meeting with your presentation, Mayor, at the very beginning of the meeting. We care about our community and we do all that we possibly can, you said. It also gives the residents the opportunity to ensure their insurance is adequate to cover them for any unforeseen circumstance. I don't think any of us believes insurance companies are not ignorant of flood-prone areas. There would be an Australia-wide, well, in fact, a worldwide information that is available to insurance companies as to what areas are what, and I don't think they actually advise people within their area that they would need flood cover. It's something that people take only if they have an inkling that there is a problem and they wouldn't know.
1 minute left, Councillor.
Thank you.
Charles.
Many of these people would have no idea whatsoever that they're purchasing a property or living in a property where there is the potential that even a 5%, which is, 5% out of 100, obviously, chance that there could be a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 20. A 1 in 10 was destructive enough back in 2016, but it certainly wasn't a 1 in 10 in Crozier Hill. Sorry, it was a 1 in 10 in Crozier Hill, but in Encounter Bay, it was probably a great deal more because there was flooding throughout the area. Anyway, I really don't, it's a late night tonight, I don't really need to say any more. I just believe that this has to come out of the cupboard. We have to do something. The only thing that we can truthfully do
Thank you, Councillor Charles.
and should do is tell our community and make them aware.
Do I have a seconder for this? Hemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I suppose the reason why I support this motion number 2, and I suppose motion number 3 could be modified slightly because it could have some impacts on costs of having enough pumps for everybody, but that can be sorted out. But the reason why I'm supporting this motion, if I draw an analogy with bushfire risk areas, you know, governments, councils, CFS, they'll always notify the community of you're living in a bushfire zone, in a risk zone. You need to have your action plans ready, whether you stay and defend or you leave early and evacuate. I see this as no different. If there's a risk to our community, they should be notified if they're in a risk area. And I think just common sense, that's what you should be doing. But somehow floods don't seem to have the same impact as bushfires do. So, but they just can occur just as frequently as a bushfire can. So that's why I'm supporting this motion, is to ensure that our community are fully aware. If they're in an area, then there's processes they must follow to ensure their safety and their property, etc. No different to a bushfire risk area.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I might just let the CEO respond to some of the points that have been raised.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Just to clarify for Councillor Kemp, Councillor Charles moved items 2 and 3 together, so just so you were clear on that one. Just to correct a few of the comments and statements made by Councillor Charles, and I believe it's quite clearly in the report. The report is not hidden away. It's been publicly available. It was presented at a public workshop that was attended by most of the members in this room, in which that imagery was actually provided and the report was presented in a public workshop. The report was then presented to a public council meeting with a series of recommendations that were actually adopted by council. That was in November 2019. It's been on council's website since that time, and we've also entered into an agreement with the Department of Environment and Water in regards to flood mapping studies that are happening around the state. This is the third flood mapping study that's been undertaken by this council since 2001. It pretty much matches that of done in 2010, and it's information this council uses to do its stormwater management planning, which we are currently investing in this financial year using this documentation around our flood management studies. Council already has pumping and sandbagging at its council depot, and we've had other reports that have come to council in regards to other generators to assist council during emergencies for the management of council infrastructure within our community, and we work alongside the CFS and the MFS in regards to any emergency management that's undertaken, whether it be fire, flood or sea surge. So council has a role to play. It is not our role to be sandbagging and pumping every single household, but we do have a role in emergency management, working alongside all of those organisations in our community. I just wanted to correct that information because this is the first time this council has actually had that document publicly available, and it's been used quite widely, and we're sharing it with other organisations so that we can be better prepared.
Does anybody else? Councillor Littley, you want to speak, and then Councillor Glasbrook.
Yeah, look, I absolutely get the sentiment of Councillor Charles's motion here, and I believe it's got great merit. I think that the alternative motions 4 and 5 together combined would be a better alternative. I think they're much tidier, a lot neater, and cover off, really nail down the detail that I think Councillor Charles is trying to achieve in this. I would prefer, so long as we're going somewhere forward, I will vote for this, but I would encourage a change to that 4 and 5 because I just think they're tighter if Councillor Charles was inclined to do so. And as far as our emergency response goes, I think that we are very well served by a workforce as well. We do have the pumps and the equipment and the like in our council depot, but we've got some of the best thinking, best operators on our machinery and that to respond to things like this as well. The guys in our work crew are really well skilled. You'll know that a lot of them are CFS members and they understand the nature of the beast, if you like, when they're out there on the ground, and that was demonstrated with some of our workers going over to the Kangaroo Island bushfires last year with machinery operation over there to help in that battle.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. And Councillor Charles, if you wanted a change from what Councillor Littley said, your recommendation from recommendation 2 and 3 to the alternative recommendation proposed by administration 4 and 5, then you're able to do that. You could withdraw your motion and then put the alternative motion forward.
I was trying, I did put 2 and 3 together because I felt that, you know, the night is getting late, and it made sense to just read them both out together, but I'd only be prepared to drop 3. Number 2 has been seconded, and
Well,
I'd like
2 and 3 have been seconded because they were done en bloc.
Well, technically they were done en bloc, that's right. But I'm concerned that the alternative recommendation says that consideration be
Okay.
given. I'm not interested in consideration. I'm interested in
That's fine.
action.
We'll go with what with the current motion.
Thank you.
Then.
And 21-22.
So,
You know, what happens between now and 21-22? Do we have a serious
Yeah.
flood?
So Councillor Glasbrook, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. I won't be supporting these motions. It's not that I don't agree with the intent, what Councillor Charles is trying to achieve, but you know, just to send council out to personally advise all residents who have property is just a ridiculous thing, in my opinion. That as councillor flat out already, we've got a huge budget, we've got a huge capital budget. All the council staff are complaining they've got too much to do and they want to send them out on a merry walk around town advising people is absurd, in my opinion. I much prefer 4 and 5. And the other thing that we need to be very careful of is, in my opinion, in relation to insurance, if you know, you're obliged to inform your insurance company of any thing that you're aware of. So if you're aware that your property is subject to flooding, you're required to inform your insurance company that. So if the council go and knock on your door and say, oh, by the way, your house is prone to flooding, you're then obliged to notify your insurance company and they'll probably wipe you off from having insurance. Whereas at this stage, if you don't technically know that, you don't need to inform them. So that's something else that's quite an important issue, I believe. I think, again, this has just been a little bit rushed. As I say, I agree with the intent. These areas have been prone to flooding, as the CEO said, since Victor Harbour's been here. Nothing's new. You know, why the big rush now? Why does it have to be done at this very minute? As far as budgeting goes, well, I believe that we can budget for a lot of these things. I mentioned earlier in the evening about priorities. Well, unfortunately, these things aren't a priority. New main streets and new arts and culture centres and new this, that and everything else are priorities in Victor Harbour, not footpaths and stormwater and roads and potholes and whatever else. So, you know, lots and lots of reasons there, and I'm babbling on a bit, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Glasbrook has a couple of things that I was going to say. I do agree with the other councillors that I can see where Councillor Charles is coming from with this, and I sympathise absolutely with the motives. But for council to instruct administration to personally advise all residents, I think is just out of our resource budget and human resources to do that. And I would hope that anyone who has bought a house or built a house in a low-lying area has taken into consideration where that property is located. It's you know, that's their personal responsibility to do that. And the information is out there. You can go onto a website, you can look at the flooding maps, you can put in the various scenarios, tweak the controls and see if your house is going to be inundated by flood, you know, of certain percentage or dimensions. So it's easy for the individual to identify whether their property is at risk. And I believe that people have the responsibility to do that for themselves. And in many cases, the insurers will be doing that before they insure a property. They'll be looking at where the potential risks are. And many of those companies will not be insuring those properties because they are of high risk. So I don't think council needs to spend the time and resources proposed in point 2 here, whereas I would consider points 4 and 5 as an alternative.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, just quickly, I agree with some of the statements around council, around the chamber tonight. I think the intent is good and I agree with it, but I think the recommendations 4 and 5 are better.
If there's no further comment, I'll bring it back to Councillor Charles to close the debate.
Yes, somewhat confusing. Public workshop that our CEO referred to in the council meeting afterwards and being on the website is all very well. Yes, that information is available to those who know what to look for or even have the thought cross their mind. I wasn't suggesting a physical door knock. I simply said that council, well, I did say face to face. I suppose that's another way of doing it. Okay, so I see that this is not going to get anywhere. There's been a lot of great points brought up by various councillors here. Councillor Glasbrook spoke about if people have a knowledge of the risk, then they may, and don't declare it, they may not get insurance at all. So we do know that when we're dealing with insurance companies, we walk a very tight line with them. If we have a car stolen and we told them we left the keys in the ignition, we probably wouldn't get insurance either. So, you know, sometimes it's best to just don't know how they took it. I will withdraw my motions in order to get some satisfaction in knowing that that there'll be some consideration. Though I'd rather that, is it possible that we can have consideration tightened up to we will?
Well, you're closing debate, Councillor Charles.
Okay.
You've had a mover and a seconder and you've had the debate, so you're currently closing your debate.
But I can withdraw my motions and recommend and go with the council's motions, can't I? That's exactly what was recommended.
Well, you could. I offered that to you at the beginning and you said no, but if you want to do it now.
Well, I'm quite within my rights to do it now.
You are, as I said, if you want to do it now, you can.
So that's what I just said. And I said, I'd just like to know if our CEO through you can tell us how we can tighten up the word consideration be given.
So, sorry, are you withdrawing your motion?
Yes, I am
You are withdrawing your motion. All right, thank you.
And we probably wanted to clarify with Councillor Kemp that he's happy with that.
Well, I want to be the fly in the ointment. Oh, fair enough. If you're withdrawing it, then I'll support that.
Through the Mayor, if you're going to consider items 4 and 5, you could simply change the word consideration, that an allocation be made in the 2021 budget for the inclusion and so forth.
Excellent word, an allocation. That's more of a positive move and a definite. So do I need to read those motions now that everybody's had a good look at them, or
you can move them,
for the sake of the gallery and the, yes? You
can move them as read if you'd like to save some time.
I'll make it quick. That consideration be given in the 2021-22 operating budget for the inclusion of non-structural flood mitigation measures such as direct consultation and education programs for properties at risk as identified in the Victor Harbour Watercourse Flood Mapping Study of 2019. And 5, that the City of Victor Harbour continue membership in the Adelaide Hills, Fleurieu, Kangaroo Island Regional Zone Emergency Management Committee and promote the SES communication on emergency planning for flood risk, how to prepare for a flood and the current advice and warning systems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp, do you still want to second that one?
I prefer to discuss them separately. I will second them, but separately. As in, I don't want to do it on block.
He's just moved them on block. Does somebody want to second it on block? Thank you, Councillor Schofield.
Point of order, Mayor Jenkins. We weren't given the opportunity to discuss these separately. You just moved automatically into, he moved them on block. I'm saying I don't want to discuss them on block. I would like to discuss them separately, so.
They're Councillor Charles's motions that he wanted to move on block. If he wants to move them separately, he can. Would you like to move them separately, Councillor Charles?
I probably shouldn't have read them out at all. I simply read them so that it could be clear for the gallery and so on. I don't mind whether they're separate or together.
All right,
Oh, I
so
do
you
mind.
want to move them
Obviously.
separately?
Let's do it separately and let's go home tonight.
Yep, that sounds like a very good idea. Do I have somebody to second that? Councillor Schofield, you wanted to second that before?
I wanted to second them en bloc.
Councillor Kemp, would you like to second the first motion?
I'll second the motion number 4 as
Thank you.
written.
Do either of you want to speak to it?
Yes, I just think that this is a better way of looking at council forward planning to look at how we deal with this type of notification, and certainly looking at various infrastructure and how we can support the community. And I don't think it's about council going around pumping out people's houses. I think it's about having supplies there for community to come and grab and use if their area is flooded. So that's why I'm supporting this one.
Anybody want to speak to the first motion? That's number. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I very much like this this approach where you go to the community to highlight to them that this may occur and use education programs and other means to get them to take action.
Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Glasbrook.
Sorry, I'll just quickly say I would have preferred the word consideration, because as a process, normally this council, when we're trying to talk about what's going to be next year's budget, we put everything in together and we decide. We don't normally like to put things in as set in stone as this is, but it's unbelievable.
I'm sure that if the council decided to have an allocation of nothing, that would also work within that motion. Anybody else want to speak to this motion? Councillor Charles, do you want to close the debate?
Yeah, it only says allocation. It doesn't say how much. It'll still be there to be decided, but at least it puts it at the forefront of this meeting. I'm sorry that perhaps I should have considered this a little more carefully to make life easier. I don't really see, I've been forced into attacking and to using the administration's recommendation because I knew the motion wouldn't get through. So that is it. That's the completion. Let's vote on it.
I'll put that recommendation number 4 to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Charles, do you want to put forward recommendation 5?
Recommendation 5, I think, speaks for itself. I think it's really a superfluous one, to be quite honest. We continue membership. I don't think there's any likelihood we wouldn't continue membership of the Adelaide Hills, Fleurieu, Kangaroo Island Zone Emergency Management.
So you don't.
So I think we might as well just delete that altogether.
Fine.
But I'm concerned that the alternative recommendation says that consideration be given. But I'm concerned that the alternative recommendation says that consideration be given.
Sorry, I'll just quickly say I would have preferred the word consideration, because as a process, normally this council, when we're trying to talk about what's going to be next year's budget, we put everything in together and we decide. We don't normally like to put things in as set in stone as this is, but it's unbelievable.
I'm sure that if the council decided to have an allocation of nothing, that would also work within that motion.